Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I'm joined for episode number 50 by both Greg Zumach and Bryan Smith. Boys, it's time for the prospect draft yet again.
Yeah, one of our favorite
Yeah.
episodes of last year, I think, right?
Yeah, I tweeted out on Friday. I was like, hey, we're recording our prospect draft. I know we had a blast doing it. I hope the listeners had fun with it because I think this might actually have been in the last 49 episodes that we've done my favorite episode that we've done up to this point. So excited to do this again. It's basically to give you guys a recap, a reminder. We probably have more listeners, different listeners than we had this time last year. The three of us are going to go through and we're going to draft teams of we each have 20 players that we will draft, fill up all the positions of a lineup, fill out a full 5-man rotation, fill out 3 relievers a piece and a few bench bats as well. And we're going to end up putting together teams. So this will look a lot like your fantasy baseball, fantasy football drafts where we're going to do the snake draft, go through one at a time. It's probably built a lot on how we have ranked our players in terms of just our prospect rankings. But at the same time, some positions aren't quite as deep as other positions, so they might bring a little extra value. But I don't know. You guys, anything else to add as far as how we're going about doing this?
I don't think so. I'm excited to hear who Bryan has as the super sneaky sleeper pick. Because last year, if you didn't remember or you didn't tune in last year, he totally, is straight up like Kobe from deep, tossed out Jefferson Rojas, who had an absolutely amazing year and is a really exciting prospect for the Cubs. So not to put an insane amount of pressure on you, Bryan, but I sometimes these tidbits, these little conversations, I mean, they're fun. You never know who you're going to unearth.
You know, it's funny. I look back at, because Greg has posted that video a couple times of me making that pick. And I think at the time I was trying to be really bold. And I said something like, it wouldn't surprise me if Rojas was like banging on the door of the Cubs top 10 prospects in a year. And it's like, now that seems like such a sort of lame prediction in hindsight. So, you know, it just reminds you like what a difference a year makes in this like particular world. You know, the prospect world, it's crazy. Things that we think are locks get turned on their head all the time.
Yeah, if you go back and listen to that episode, I'm sure we said some pretty ridiculous things. If you go back and look at the picks we made some pretty silly picks in addition to some good picks like the Jefferson Rojas pick. For you guys' reference, I went back to earlier today to see kind of who might have won between the three of us last year. I went through and kind of basically just went category by category, and Greg Zumach had the most wins among the categories. He won the most positions. So
I think he won. I will tip my hat and say he won.
Yeah, and barely, really. I had Zumach at the top spot. I had Bryan winning 8 spots, and then I had a whopping 2 wins positionally. I went and published the poll. I'll do the same thing with this. But last year, at the time of the publishing, I asked you guys, the fans, you guys, the listeners, who won the prospect draft, and 42% of people said Greg Zumach won at the time, even. So that's turning out pretty well. So it looked good at the time. It's looking even better now. So I don't know. We got 60 guys that we're going to draft here today. We're going to go give a tidbit or two of each guy here, I'm sure. But we have a lot to get into for sure. So I randomized the draft order before we started this up. It was
asterisk.
It was the same order as last year. It was the same order as last year, which is Greg Zumach.
It just means you didn't clear your cookies.
me going second and Bryan going third. And like I said, we will go snake draft. If you guys are watching on YouTube, obviously you see that the draft board is up in front of you. I'll pull up the rosters for each of us as we're kind of going through here. So Zumach, without further ado, who are you selecting with your first overall pick of the draft?
Yep. So I went back and forth between 2 different players. This shouldn't be a huge surprise here. The way I had a bit of strategy to it, but I am going to go PCA for number 1. And so while you're typing that out, just really quick, you know, he adjusts to his level after a bit of time. That's huge for me. I think he had his adjustment. He's working with Dustin Kelly. I'm rolling with PCA.
And probably like the best thing a player can do, like as we look back, and when we look back in a year, if a guy goes to the major leagues and succeeds, it's going to look the best just for our team, and PCA, I think, has the best chance of any of these guys of having a really good 2024 season. So, yeah, it's going to be a good pick.
Yeah, with my pick. So I think that Zumach for you probably came down to just the 1-2 punch at the top with PCA and Cade Horton. I came with the mindset was if you took one, I will take the other. So I'm going to go with Cade Horton with my second pick, or with my first pick, but the second overall pick here. I'm going Cade Horton. It just, I mean, with Cade, it's just, I mean, the crazy breakout that we saw from him a year ago. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an additional crazy outbreak or breakout from him this year in 2024, cracking the major leagues. I think all three of us are super high on him making the major leagues this summer. And so, yeah, I think that Cade Horton was kind of a no-brainer for me at 2.
Okay. Third pick, I'm going to go with Matt Shaw. And I'm going to draft Matt Shaw at the position of... I didn't think about this.
You can shift it around. I think.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think there's
You can put him somewhere
see
for
who
now.
your roster is.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're gonna put him at second base for now, and we're gonna draft Michael Busch as a third baseman just because that sounds ridiculous, and I'd like to start off in a ridiculous, just bucking consensus type of way.
You said third base.
Yes. So these are both guys that I think the Cubs would love to be able to handle it at third base. We'll see in both cases if that's possible. If I had to guess, I think Matt Shaw can probably figure his way into making it work, and Michael Busch probably not. But two guys that are both going to be in big league camp, both probably going to be on the Marquee Sports Network, not long after people hear this episode. So in real games. So excited for those two guys, and yeah, we're gonna start there.
Yeah, we got 4 guys off the board in PCA, Cade, Matt Shaw, and Michael Busch, who we all expect to see. Shaw, maybe a little bit less expectations, but we could all see each of these guys in Chicago this year, which is super fun. I'm going to go actually with a guy who's a little bit further down my overall rankings, but I think that the positional depth isn't nearly as strong. And this is a guy we probably won't see in Chicago. I'm going to draft Moises Ballesteros here.
Oh man, God, that's exactly what I was just going to do.
I think I have him hovering around like the 10-ish spot as far as my overall rankings. But like after Ballesteros at catcher, I mean it's probably Pablo Aliendo behind, and so I think I'm gonna break off some Mo Baller action here.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Maybe I'm biased because that's exactly what I was going to do. But it's certainly, I think, a really good one. So with that in mind, as I just am so depressed on that, I'm going to go Owen Casey. I think that it's an advanced bat. What he's done at 20 is really incredible. There's a chance we see him in Chicago. I think he's going to dabble with a little bit of first base. Regardless, I'm definitely buying on the bat. I'll probably start judging him more at like May than I will in that April time, probably most likely in AAA. Beyond that, it's funny because I think we've got a lot of possibilities here, and I think I am going to go Jefferson Rojas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This one is going to be pushing it because Midwest League, that young, that first month, it's going to look a little rough. But you know what? I think just where we want to go with shortstop, I think Jefferson Rojas is a fun one. It's always fun to bet on upside.
I wonder if the Cubs have a lot of middle infield depth at that level. I wonder if there's a chance Rojas stays back for 4 weeks. Just they wait out that cold, put him back in extended spring training where he sort of took off last year, just get comfortable that way and let like Ed Howard, Josh Rivera, all those types of guys that are also in play have the South Bend job for a little bit before Jefferson's ready. And that's one thing to watch.
Yeah, that's a great call, Brian.
Yeah, that's a fun. I mean, I wonder where I didn't look back exactly where you had Jefferson Rojas, where you snagged him a year ago, Brian. But I can't imagine he was even within 20 slots of 7th overall, where Zumach just grabbed him.
Right.
All right, so it's back around to me with the 8th overall pick, and my third best prospect in the organization is still on the board there, and I'm going to go with Kevin Alcantara. I still have him ranked 3rd best in the entire organization. I thought you'd snag him. I thought you grabbing, having back-to-back picks there, Zumach, with 6 and 7. I thought you'd go the two guys that have been compared to each other so often between Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara. I thought you'd grab both. So I will take Kevin Alcantara, one of the most fun players in the organization.
I thought about just finishing out the outfield, honestly, at that point. it would have been pretty fun.
And to me, with Alcantara, like we talked, like Owen Casey last year, like really broke out in a lot of ways. And I think that we still haven't seen like a true breakout from Alcantara, and I think we might get that this year in 2024.
So do me a favor, Huss. Move Matt Shaw to shortstop for me.
Okay.
Matt Shaw, played a lot of shortstop last year, so I don't think I'm playing with the rules too much there. I'm going to get James Triantos because the infield depth, in the system it's not bad, but to grab 3 of the top guys, I think puts me in a good spot for the rest of the draft. It's pretty wild to think that we're like a few months away from James Triantos having like a historic Arizona Fall League season, basically like flirting with hitting 500 for a while and then just settling in for 400. Really talented player. I think during the offseason, the narrative can start to turn and we can start to think about guys as trade assets and things like that. But like James Triantos, property of the Cubs and in one of the better hit tools in the minor leagues. So I'm going to go there. And then, I think I need a starting pitcher here, and Jordan Wicks is on the board. So, we're going to get the, PCA or Jordan Wicks, who has better odds of getting the rookie of the year to the north side. I don't know. It could be either guy. And, if Jordan Wicks wins the 5th starter spot but randomly comes out and wins like 14 games, those old school voters giving him rookie of the year, that's going to look good for the team. So we're going to put that, we're going to put that atop our rotation.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing you snagged Jordan Wicks, because if I was going to grab him next, and having Cade Horton and Jordan Wicks up top of my rotation would have felt really good, in my opinion. So I feel like at this point, like we got the top 10 kind of covered. Now we're getting into a little bit different territory in terms of the prospects we're listing off here. I could go the route of you just win a starter. I could go a starter. I think there's a clear like number 3 pitcher here. I can go that route. I'm just kind of looking through. I have everything kind of marked off in terms of positionally. I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go with a starting pitcher as well. I'm gonna go with Ben Brown here at number 11 overall. Slot him in at number 2 in my starting pitching rotation behind Cade Horton.
All right, that's a fun one. So that leaves me back to back here. Huss has gotten my picks back to back, and that is fine. So with some starting pitching depth no longer being on there, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I am actually going to go. Man, I've gone back and forth on this one. I think I'm going to try to snag Hayden McGarry at first base.
Wow, nice.
Okay. Yeah, there's not a lot of depth there. There's certainly still some names, but I thought, let's kind of roll the dice on that one a little bit. And then I am actually going to go. See, I'm just debating on if I want to let this guy go another round and see if I can pick him up later. Shoot, you know what? I'm high on him. I'm just going to go Drew Gray. I really like the whiffs. I love the whiffs that he says. He absolutely needs to work on control command, but that is the last thing that comes back post Tommy John surgery. I think 2024 is a good year for him. Could be a really, really fun season for Drew Gray.
Yeah, I think if you're going to go for a starting pitcher, that's your first starting pitcher when 3 other guys are off the board. I think going Drew Gray, who could really explode this year, is probably a pretty good pick there at number 13. All right, back to me with the 14th overall pick. All right, you went with McGarry, which kind of triggered me thinking I might need to go first base as well. I don't know. I'm looking across the board. Feels too early for relievers. Obviously, we could have a Brian. You and I with Jimmy back in the day did have a reliever draft. And I feel like we could have an entire podcast again just talking about relief prospects and have a blast doing so.
I remember that episode. That was great.
I can't believe we did that. That's like the epitome of some nerd prospect talk.
It got deep, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'll go with a guy. I'll go back to the outfield here. I've got Kevin Alcantara, who's super explosive. Alexander Canario lives off explosiveness, and if he gets a lot of run in Chicago, I mean, I think that this could end up being a fun pick of going Canario. Whether he's a DH, he's filling in all three outfield spots. I'm gonna go Alexander Canario at 14 overall.
Yeah, that's a good pick. I felt like I needed that for the outfield, but we're gonna make do later because we're gonna get our second starting pitcher here, and we're really only doing this to upset Z. My first pitcher that I drafted, his initials are JW, as are my second pitcher, Jackson Wiggins, Cubs second round pick from last year, who just like if you put your ear down and you hear whispers from Arizona, it's just the Cubs people being very, very proud of their Jackson Wiggins pick. There's a lot of optimism about that arm, and I could see him having the best second half of any pitching prospect in the system and flying up lists for sure. So I'm going to take him. Man, I think I want to get Luke Little.
Nice.
I think Luke Little is
Yeah.
very clearly the best reliever in the system, like a whole, a tier or two ahead of anybody else. Looks like he's going to have a good year. Just a guy that you think Craig Counsell is going to love, right? I mean, he likes
I do. Yeah.
relievers that are sort of different and weird. The Cubs like that as an organization too, and Luke checks those boxes. So, prioritize major league success.
That was probably a pretty good pick, considering I think that I think Luke Little is clearly that best relief pitching prospect, and then I think that all the other guys, it's probably just a matter of like our favorites, between the three of us. It's like who do we dig more? There might be some overlap in guys that we prefer, but I think there's just a whole bunch of guys that fall after that. So getting Luke Little is probably a smart thing there. Okay, back to me at 17. My first base route is still there. I've got two guys I'm thinking about. And I'm trying to. Well, I guess with Zumach, you've already got a first baseman with Hayden McGeary. You do have an open DH slot, so that's fine. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go with a guy that is. I'm going to draft higher than what I have him ranked. I'm going to go BJ Murray here just because you have an open third base slot. I'm going to put BJ Murray at first base for now and maybe slide him over to third base. I think there's more of a chance that you would have snagged him as opposed to the other first base option.
That's a good pick.
That's a great pick. That was definitely a guy I was looking at in this range. The next two choices I'm going to pick is, and I'm not sure where I'm going to line him up yet. And we can debate. I'm going to go Michael Arias. I think that is it's a gamble on the arm. I'm not sure if he's a starter or reliever next year. If you told me that he pitched the entire year in high A or double A as a starter, I believe it. If you told me he made it to the majors as a reliever, I'd be happy, but I wouldn't be that surprised. So I'm going to go Michael Arias. And then the next name might be a little surprising, but I'm going to take Johnny Long and give him a little bit of run at third base, and just kind of see how that rolls.
That's probably the biggest deviation from rankings at this point, right?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't have Johnny Long ranked that high, but just positionally looking at everything, it's a fun one.
I like it. All right, that's back to me then, right?
Yes.
All right, let me cross off Jonathan Long from my list here. I could really be evil and just like draft Pablo Aliendo and just like stick him on my bench and leave you guys with no more catchers.
Right? You gotta do what you gotta do.
I won't do that, I don't think. All right, I've been teasing Matt Mervis for a hot minute for like 3 rounds.
Man, you've been talking about him.
I know, I've been teasing him for a while. I kind of want to go with a starting pitcher though. Looking at this, all right. I am gonna go with Matt Mervis. I know the shine is kind of worn off a little bit, but he's a guy who's ready for Chicago. Who knows what we see from him this year? Obviously, like Michael Busch is the starting first baseman in Chicago, but there's nothing been addressed at third base really for the Chicago Cubs. So maybe Bush goes over to third. Mervis is up at first base. I don't know. I think that Matt Mervis has been on the board long enough. I'm going to pull the trigger on him. I'm going to put him at first and move BJ Murray over to third base.
Yep, I was going to pick Matt if you didn't. So, that probably means it was a good pick. I was thinking I was going to do two, and I am going to do two of like a single position just to try to mess with the draft a little bit. And deciding between two, I think I'm going to do two starting pitchers.
Okay. Oh, man.
I'm going to do Brody McCullough.
Evil.
Yeah.
He was just,
man.
Listen to smart organizations, what they're asking the Cubs for this offseason. Yep. It's Brody McCullough. Look at like the advanced stat offerings on the internet. They really liked the dominant season Brody McCullough had last year. Might not start the year. Might be a little slowed, had an injury at the end of last year, but he's going to pitch plenty. And then I'm going to go with Will Sanders.
Man. Oh, man.
I think,
next two.
Will Sanders, Cubs pick last year, fourth round, right, Z?
Yeah, fourth rounder.
A guy with sort of college success, but also not quite as much as you think with his with the talent in his arm. And the Cubs definitely think they can make a couple tweaks and that he will take off. Also, if Will Sanders somehow starts in low A, he's going to be way too good for that level. Yeah. And so he could be leading the system in a bunch of pitching categories come June 1st.
Man, that has me panicked a little bit. Do I now pivot over to pitchers or let it slide a little bit because now you've taken all of them? Man, I think we've officially reached the first wave of like, all right, now I'm into scramble mode a little bit. Let's go. What do I need? I guess it's important for me to look at what I need. Positionally, I need a second baseman, a shortstop, left field. I need pitchers. I got to go the pitching route. Give me. How low do I want to go on my list here? This is making for a really good podcast waves.
So low.
All right. I think that I was really impressed by the season we saw last year from Brandon Birdsell. And I think that I would be shocked if we see a season as impressive this year from Birdsell as we saw last year, because last year was incredible. And he's going to be at the higher levels of the minors. He's going to probably start in Double-A. I'm going to go with Brandon Birdsell here.
Might have a less successful season, but might have better stuff. That's something to look out for.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, Zumach, now that all the pitchers are gone, it's your pick.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
So I am going to go with a pitcher here, and I'm actually going to go with Porter Hodge. I am banking on, and I don't know a starter or reliever, but let's lean as a starter right now. I'm going to bank that the new splitter that he's got will work to effectively neutralize some lefties. I think it'll generate as a chase pitch. I'm gonna buy on Porter Hodge. I think he's a fun one. So the next name that I have out there, depth at second base, it does fall off pretty quick from James Triantos. But I would also say that Pedro Ramirez is a really nice option there. And so I'm going to take Pedro Ramirez as a second baseman.
Yep, that's
don't
fair.
give him to yourself. No,
I was actually going to select him next, so I'll make a trade with you.
Oh, okay.
All right. So Pedro Ramirez is off the board. That's a really good pick. Because I do need a second baseman. I am the only person without a second baseman now. All right. I think that I am going to still stay away from the reliever market. There's some outfielders still out there, but I already have two outfielders covered. I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to steal one of your guys here, Zumach. I'm going to go with Josh Rivera here, and I'm going to put him at second base for me. Or I have shortstop open too. I'll put him at shortstop now, kind of knowing I can move Josh Rivera over to second base if need be.
Okay. I need an outfielder. So even though I think this is a risky pick, I'm going to take Christian Franklin. Started to break out in the second half of last year. He's going to that big AA jump. So, he's at that like part of a prospect where if he has a successful year, he's going to be way higher on prospect lists, but he's also playing a level that is way above anything he's ever played before. And, we're going to see if he can maintain that decreased strikeout rate or if it's going to go back to sort of where it was in college. And, it'll be a fun dice roll to keep track of. And then, my second pick, I'm going to have more fun with. If you don't mind moving Michael Bush to first base for me. I don't even know. I don't want to make you keep moving guys, but Angel Cepeda is who I'm going to draft.
You want Shaw at third?
Yeah, you can move Shaw to third, and I'll do Cepeda at shortstop. And, he's going to be all over the place in the Arizona infield, I'm sure, sharing the position a little bit and just trying a few different things. Probably my favorite of the Cubs international signings from 2023. One of those kids with power in his bat and tons of projection. Looked pretty good in the Dominican Summer League from what I understand. So, if he takes a step forward, it could be a big one. So, yeah, those are my two.
Yeah, that's good. I had a grouping of Angel Cepeda, Derniche Valdez, Fernando Cruz, just kind of like not really ranked. It's like just going to feel it out if I'm going to select one of those three because they're also young, playing at the lower complex levels. It's back to me here with my pick. I'm going to go back to the starting pitcher market, and I've been hyping up Luis Rujano all off season, so I might as well select him here as my starting pitcher number 4. So I think that we probably see Rujano go back to Myrtle Beach, where he spent quite a bit of time there last year. And so if he goes back to Myrtle Beach, I think he'll really have that level figured out. So statistically, I think he'll look really solid in Myrtle this year, with the chance of getting bumped up to South Bend.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Man, see now we're getting into some interesting range here. And I've been going back and forth on a few different areas here, but one of them, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to bet on the upside. I'm going with Cole Franklin.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? One of these years, he is absolutely going to figure out the control command. We see it for spurts. And shoot, if he gives me 45 control and 40 command, I think it's going to eat. So I'm absolutely going that route. And we could go a lot of different directions with regard to the rest of the outfield, but the depth definitely falls out. And if this is going to be 2021 me, these back-to-back picks, just because I want it to happen, I'm going to go Brennan Davis. I really want a bounce back season from both of them, and Brennan can do it. Just give me a little healthy run.
I was going to pull the trigger on him if you didn't. So that's, I mean, I think at this point in the draft, I think that getting Brennan is, I mean, that's betting on some
it's good
him
value
returning
there.
to past form, but I think it's good. Yeah. Because I feel like at this point we're looking at players that they are, like I said at the beginning of this episode, right? It's players that are our vibes. It's players that we specifically dig. That's like my Luis Rujano pick a little bit. It's back to me. We all have 4 of our 5 starting pitcher slots filled out. So I think that I'm going to kind of leave that last spot to a guy that I like. I'm going to leave that for later, I think is what I'm going to do. I don't have a reliever. Zumach, you have 2 kind of relievers in Porter Hodge and Michael Arias. And then Bryan, you have Luke Little. I'm going to finally pull the trigger on a reliever. I'm going to go with Bailey Horn here. And my thinking with Bailey Horn is that what we saw him do over the past couple of years is make it up to a level, immediately struggle for a little bit of time, and then figure it out and really turn it on and get a whole lot better. We saw him dominate back in Tennessee when he returned there to start off the 2023 season. He got called up to AAA Iowa, and he struggled. And so I'm expecting that when he returns this year back to Iowa, he's going to be really, really strong, really, really impressive. And we probably more than likely see him in Chicago, especially given the fact that he was just added to the 40-man roster this offseason.
Okay. Last year, Hayden McGeary was a guy that got to A-ball, was too good for it, got to AA. I think that's what's going to happen this season with Brian Calmer. who had a great year last year with Myrtle Beach after he was drafted. I'm going to put him at DH on my team. It'll be interesting if the Cubs get him many third base looks, or if they just say, we're going to play at first base DH and want you to hit as much as possible. Second pick, without loving a pick right now, I think I better just fill catcher with Pablo Aliendo. Pablo is likely to be in AAA. Maybe a small chance that he starts in AA, just because there's a little bit of depth that the Cubs have added this offseason, but probably in AAA. And you never know. I mean, the way that position goes with injuries, he could be a guy that comes to Chicago, maybe has a really fun 10 days. Like, Cubs fans fall in love with him. He's got fantastic energy. He'll jump off the screen when more people get to see him. So, give me those vibes on this team.
I like that. The vibes always make the draft look better.
Always.
All right, guys. So I got positionally, I need to fill a left fielder and I need to fill a second baseman. I've got a couple options up the middle that I think I'm going to let Zumach take one of them with one of his next two picks, and so I'm going to go the left fielder route. For now, I'm going to put him out there at left field. I really liked what I saw from Rafael Morel last year during his time in Myrtle Beach. And so he's been in the system a long time. He's going to be up in South Bend this year. I'll put him in left field because last year he played literally all of the diamond. He played left field. He played right field. I think he played a little bit of center, but some corner infield. He can play wherever. I'm going to stick him in left field because I think that's a position he can handle. And that's also a position I need taken care of on my team.
Nice. I like it a lot. So, I've got some starters that may end up relievers, so I may kind of leave that for a little bit. I am going to take another starter, so this may end up flexing down the line, but I'm going to take Connor Noland,
nice.
Who looked really, really good in high A. Double A is always an adjustment, but I think he can handle it. And then I'm really surprised that this guy is still on the board, but Luis Vasquez. And I'll just put him in as a utility guy or may flex, somebody else down. It doesn't matter, but I'm just going to bet on the bat.
Yeah, let's do, you want me to put,
you do.
I'll do some shuffling. I'll move Johnny Long over
good.
to DH. I'll put Pedro at third base for you. Rojas moved to second, and you got Luis Vasquez slick fielding over playing shortstop for you.
Love it. Thank you.
That's a good one. That's it. So that was I was down at the two shortstops, and Luis Vasquez was one of them. The other one for me was the opposite of Luis Vasquez. Christian Hernandez is still on the board. I know he had a rough year last year, but we're down here at pick number 38, and Christian Hernandez is still on the board. He didn't look the best. His stats didn't look great, but he will be back in Myrtle Beach this year. So if we're going off like numbers he puts up, I'm sure they will look better. I don't know if he'll be ranked higher by midseason compared to where he is right now, but I think the numbers will be better. I'm going to take Christian Hernandez here at the 38th overall pick, and I'm going to slot him in at I'll put him at second. Him and Josh Rivera they can be interchangeable at short and second.
Well, we're getting into it, boys. We're getting down to some tougher selections.
Dude, this is way more difficult than like a fantasy football draft because fantasy football, you at least get like 2 minutes to pick. We're churning through these puppies.
We're moving.
I know. All right. I had a pick in my head and now I've forgotten it. Okay. For my last starting pitcher spot, I know that there's just one guy that I want to get. It's me and Todd Johnson are aligned on his breakout potential. Give me Kevin Valdez as a guy that breaks a couple tiers up this season in the Cubs organization. Didn't want to miss him.
You want to talk a little bit about him at all? I know that's probably a name that people are not as familiar with Kevin Valdez.
Sure, yeah. Kevin Valdez kind of reminds me of like when Braylon Marquez and Giovanni Cruz were coming through the system, a guy who, if you look at his initial listing of what his size is, nothing jumps off the page. And then you see him in person and okay, he's taller than I expected. And then the next year you see him and, he's adding weight now. And hasn't quite like put together even just like a healthy 3 months yet, but a guy that has always gotten some credit for what he's done behind the scenes, extended spring training here, instructs there, has has shown, just if you watch video, like, 3 usable pitches. So if those take a step forward and he gets to low A, like, could definitely have some success this year. Really, I'm just needing health when I make that pick. I'm going to just wait on bats. I want to make sure that I get the pitching I like. And the other pitcher that I really want to get is Zach Lee. Zach Lee is a guy that, there are seasons that you have in the minor leagues where if you have success early in the year, everyone notices it. And if you have success later in the year, then oftentimes it goes unseen. Zach started the year injured, started it just okay in his first month, getting back with South Bend and then Tennessee. But man, his second half, he was really probably the best reliever in the system in the second half. A guy that other teams really like, a guy that the Cubs internally just love his slider. And if that fastball just ticks up a little bit more towards what it was like in 2022 versus 2023, then he's going to end the year in Chicago.
You got a couple good relievers in Luke Little and Zach Lee. I mean, that's about as good as it gets. I'm going to follow your lead with the relief pitcher route, and I'm going to go with a guy that I've always talked a ton about on this show. I'm going to go with Frankie Scalzo Jr. I know he had a really solid year last year. I know that the team really likes what they see from Frankie Scalzo. I think he probably starts off the year in Double-A Tennessee. With a reliever, if you're starting off in Double-A Tennessee, like, there's always a shot that you can make it up to Chicago this year. So I'm going to pull the trigger on my guy Frankie Scalzo Jr. here and slot him in as my number 2 reliever.
Whew, that's a good one. Yeah, there's not a lot of reliever depth here. I mean, in the system there definitely is, but if we're looking at this type of a draft, okay. So I'm a little surprised he's still there, especially with where the system is. But I am going to go Michael Carrico at catcher. I don't even know how much catcher he's going to be, but I would absolutely say he's eligible here for this.
Yes, for sure.
I think that is completely fair. And then now I'm into some range here. I am going to go off the board for the reliever route, and I am going to go Giovanni Cabrera.
Oh man.
Yeah, he's been on my list. It's like when is it too early to pick him? And
you knew exactly what you were doing, taking him right in front of me.
Darn right, man. Yep.
You know how I feel about guys named Giovanni in this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. That's your obvious shirt stuff. It's just I love Giovanni pitchers.
I'm telling you, or position player. I love Giovanni Cuevas, and then I love Giovanni Cruz, and now I love Giovanni Cabrera. You're killing me, Zumach.
Mm-hmm.
Man. Okay. All right. So there goes my third reliever. So I'll come back to that position later. So remember, we still have some 3 bench spots. We have an infield bench spot, an outfield bench spot, and then just kind of a utility. You can fill that with a catcher. You can fill that with any other position, really. I still have to fill my DH spot. So basically, I can just take whoever I think is the next best bat. And there's some good ones still out there. I think that there's still a guy that I have ranked pretty decently high still on the board. Or if I just want to go with a big bopper. I'll take Christopher Pasiola. I'll take him here. I still have him ranked a little bit high in the organization. He will be in Myrtle Beach this year. I think grabbing him at 44th overall is decent. I think he will probably be playing third base for the Pelicans. And I can slot him in at either third base or DH and have BJ Murray playing the other version of that.
So I didn't realize until we started this exercise that outfield in this system is tough.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too.
Run out of steam real quick. I mean, I like the top of the system with outfielders. Excellent. The depth, I didn't even realize that, it gets a little thin. So I'm going to have to cheat. I'm going to have to move James Triantos to the outfield, guys.
Okay, that's fair.
He played all of 5 games in center field for the South Bend Cubs and another 6 in the Arizona Fall League. So I apologize in advance for that cheat, but that allows us to take Alexis Hernandez, who I think is probably my highest rated guy still left undrafted. A guy that had just tons of success last year. I was really amazed by it. Just seemed like every week he was having another successful week. Every game he was doing something in the box score to help. Has been obviously overshadowed by his brother in the system, and there's a good chance they play next to each other this year. And Alexis is the guy that I think sees pitches out of a pitcher's hand better, and so if he has more success than his brother this year, I think he might start to build some distance there in rankings and in a sense, sort of make the pick look better. All right. How many spots we got left?
Looks like, Bryan, you have one more relief pitcher spot. You have one more outfield slot, and then your 3 bench slots.
Okay. So my last bench spot, I'm going to take on a guy that might be an offensive player, might be a pitcher. We don't know his health status going into 2024, but Naz Moulay is just a super talent, and he missed last year with Tommy John, but just one of the highest sort of like athleticism players the Cubs have had since like DJ Wilson or something like that.
Nice pull.
Yeah. So he could play shortstop for the Arizona Complex League Cubs come summer. He could be pitching for Myrtle Beach come May. We really don't know. We have not heard a lot about the guys who missed last year with Tommy John. So that's going to be one of the more fun things to pay attention to in March is who's ready to go and who's not.
We talked about it quite a bit on last year's version of this episode. How we were kind of selecting some guys that we knew would play well to some fans. Where like if they saw their name written down on their team, that they'd be like, "Oh, like this is good." And I think Naz is one of those guys. Naz Moulay is one of those guys where people are going to see him at the end of your bench and be like, "Oh, like he's at the end of the bench. Like that must be a good team that Bryan has." So that was a very strategic pick. I liked it. I like it. All right, I'm back up. I'm going to fill that last starting pitcher slot that I have. And I'm going to go with a draft pick from last year. I'm going to go with LMG. I'm going to go with Luis Martinez Gomez, who will probably spend the entire year, is my guess, in Myrtle Beach, which helps his stats if I'm going that route for sure, being in the pitcher's ballparks. I think that I really like what we've seen or what we saw from LMG coming out of the draft. He's going to be my kind of surprise pick. It could be interesting to see what he does this year. This could end up, but it's my number 5 starting pitcher slot, so I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk there.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I like it. So, all right, let's see how I've got 2 reliever spots left, and I've got my 3 bench, right?
2 relievers, 3 bench. Yep, you're
3 relievers, 3
yeah.
bench. Okay. So a little bit of tossing that around. This is interesting. I am going to go with a pitcher. I'm going to go with Santi. And I guess I would put him in as a starter, and maybe we can drop, I don't know, maybe we drop
Hodge
to reliever. At this point, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
I mean, I still consider him a starter, but yeah, let's do that. And then this one's a little bit of the dark horse pick. I am going to go Carter Trice.
Ooh,
and
nice.
He was my backup to backup option if no catchers were on the board. But I think the bat will play, and I really loved that pick. And if he's sitting there as a catcher too, I kind of like it.
That's a fun one.
Yep.
He was a second baseman at NC State. As soon as he got in the Cubs organization, they switched him over to catcher, like they like to do with certain athletic second basemen, a la Bryce Windham, who I don't think I want to take here yet. I don't know. Man, I might have to pull the trigger on Bryce Windham at some point. I've still got a relief pitcher position open and my 3 bench slots. So I guess I can go. I'll go upside. It feels weird that Bryan, you got Angel Cepeda at 28. and it feels weird that we're down here
Yep.
at 50 and I can still take Derniche Valdez.
I agree.
So I'm going to go ahead and pull the trigger on him and put him in my infield bench for my team.
Yeah, I think that's a smart pick. Okay, I am gonna go. I keep talking about Will Frisch on this podcast. I think he's just become a guy for me. So I think because he's coming back from Tommy John, it's probably unlikely that he spends the whole year as a starter. So, as long as you guys are okay with it, I would imagine he is going to be a sort of sandwich reliever of some variety when he returns. And so I'm going to make him my third reliever. And then I need an outfielder. I've been saying that for about 7 rounds here. So let's go with Ezekiel Pagan, a guy that just hits everywhere he goes. One of those guys that I don't think AA is going to meaningfully challenge him like it will other players, because he sees the baseball and he puts the bat on the baseball. And so the strikeout rate doesn't scare me that much. If his strikeout rate goes up, it'll go up to 16% or 18% or something like that. Something still usable. And if he just added any mass this offseason, then it will help him. I mean, he's one of those guys where he has one thing he can work on as a prospect and he knows it and everybody in his life knows it. So just add weight, add muscle, and you're moving up lists. So I'm going to guess he did that a little bit this offseason.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that having him, I mean, you'd probably like to have him in the outfield bench for one of these teams, but I think you bring up a good point though. Like we saw with Darius Hill hit like crazy in AA. Ezekiel Pagan, I think he's going to hit like crazy in AA this year, just like he has coming up to the system. It'll be AAA when we really see a test for Ezekiel Pagan.
Agreed.
All right, it's back to me. I still have a reliever and an outfield bench, and then an extra, a last slot on my bench. I think I'm still going to hold off on the reliever route, which means I'm going to fill that outfield bench slot with our guy, Cole Roeder. Talk about bringing vibes to a team.
Yeah.
I think he epitomizes bringing vibes to a team. And I think that, I don't know, we talked to him on the podcast here, and I think that change in mentality that he seemed to have this past year, I think he really started to take off mentally. And I think that means a whole lot, especially once you're reaching the upper levels of the minors. And so the thing is with Cole is if he's assigned to AAA from the get-go, it's going to be a crowded outfield in AAA. It's also going to be a crowded outfield in AA. So making sure he can get as much playing time as possible is going to be important, because I think if he can get that consistent playing time, he's going to be pretty good. So I'll take our guy Cole Roeder here at number 53 overall. All right, Zumach, what you got?
All right. So now I've got, a little bit of a Sophie's Choice situation here. Shoot. I have 3 players that I all want to get, and I'm not sure that it'll happen before somebody takes them. But I get back-to-back here, so I'm at least going to get 2 of them. Riley Martin is, for some reason, still on the board, and I really like what he can bring to you. I mean, that was a rock star pick to get for that cheap. Money saving, what he's done. I think he's really awesome reliever. Hopefully he locks in the command back in AAA. And then the next one, boy, this one is interesting. Can you scroll down a little bit? I want to see who has what here. Oh, man. Okay. All right.
You still have both your infield and outfield bench slots that you can still fill. And actually, that's all you have to fill.
That's it. That's all I have. Okay.
Yep.
So here's my question. Are players that are only going to play in the DSL eligible?
I don't know, Brian. I'll kick it to you. I don't
remember if we did that last year.
I think we did, because I
think if they're signed, it's a fair game.
Organization, okay. Yeah.
You know what?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Fernando Cruz.
Yeah.
Just, why not? It's depth bench bat. Let's just see. But I think he could put up some serious numbers in the DSL.
I think you put up some serious numbers in the DSL.
Yeah.
I think that if you're going by stats, I think that's a rock star pick. Yeah. I think it's still a great pick regardless of anything, you know.
Yeah.
All right, I have 2 slots to fill. Still one reliever and just any bench player. All right, I guess I'll go ahead and pull the trigger on my last reliever, so I can keep my options open for my last overall pick. Um, hmm. I think that I really liked what we saw from Jose Romero last year in Myrtle Beach. And can he repeat that? I don't know. Well, to be determined. He'll be in South Bend this year. But he really popped onto the radar. And we were taught. I mean, we were taught he made it to the Arizona Fall League last year as a super young guy. Yeah, I dig Jose Romero. I know that Sam Wiederhalf, the broadcaster for the Pelicans, really liked Jose Romero. So that's all I needed to hear, really.
All right, I think I'm going to fill out the bench with some post-hype guys and hope that, you know, they were sort of humbled into an offseason of working on some weaknesses and improving sort of the low-hanging fruit in their game. 2 guys that just strike out too much but have tons of talent and were drafted very early. Chase Strumpf and Jordan Wogu. You know, Strumpf, you know, we saw video actually, I think from Rich, right, of Strumpf recently, and his swing looked in a good spot. He did better in AAA. Like when I was sort of looking back at the numbers the other day, like he did better than I remembered, and oddly like struggled against lefties in a big way, but hit righties like pretty much just fine in AAA. So that was like good to look back on and be like, okay, I don't think you have to be out on this guy yet. He has some like real skills in terms of seeing the ball, and he accesses his power a lot easier than most. So, yeah, you never know what happens at the major league level. And, you know, could he find his way into an everyday role at Iowa and then build on that and into something even more? I could see it. Jordan Wogu just, man, he got caught at the beginning of the season, just like he wasn't ready for what he was seeing, I think, with the ball and just the higher level that he was at in AA. And, you know, he improved as the year went along. And I think he obviously went into this offseason understanding like, okay, the fastball high and really good breaking balls away are tough for me. And I'm sure that was just all the work this offseason. And he has so much athleticism and strength, and he's a really intelligent guy, and he works his butt off in the off season. So I'm going to bet that he has a bounce back season this year.
Brian, you knew that I was going to take Chase Strumpf if you didn't take him. I mean, it was I had to. So good pick if you ask me. I'm going to put since I don't have any more. This is my last pick, and then the last pick after that is Zumach with the final pick number 60. So I'll lay my cards down here. I'm between 2 guys for my final pick in my final bench spot, and they maybe could not be more opposite baseball players, and that is Felix Stevens and Bryce Windham. Who with Felix Stevens, he led the organization in home runs, I believe, last year, playing part of his time in Myrtle Beach, which is crazy. Obviously, he strikes out way too much. He'll be up in AA, where pitchers will more likely take advantage of those holes that he has in his swing. But the power is crazy. If he can just limit the strikeouts to like around 30%, he doesn't even necessarily need to be under 30%, just around 30%. I think like that's a successful season. And then Bryce Windham is the opposite, right? Where he is very contact oriented. He is very close to the majors, impacting the club for very different reasons than like him just putting up great offensive numbers. I'm gonna go with Felix Stevens here. I think that having that big bopper as the last spot on my bench is a fun thing to have. So give me Felix Stevens, but I'm gonna hope that you take Bryce Windham, maybe Zumach. I don't know. I guess you have an outfield slot.
Yeah,
though, so
I've got an outfielder. He was definitely in my final kind of consideration there. So love Bryce, and if this was just straight bench bats, I probably would consider it. Go three
and
catchers.
if it was a catcher situation. Oh, I guess you also have Carter Trice. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So this one's a tough one, but actually, I'm going to buy a little bit of the hype from the folks in the draft room who really liked Brett Bateman, and they think he is going to be really good. And in conversations, I mentioned like, hey, he's kind of in that same vein as this guy that I liked pre-draft, and they're like, I liked him better than them. So I think that was a really powerful statement for me, and I realize I'm keeping that vague, so I apologize. But yeah, I think let's go Brett Bateman. Let's end this really, I think, very fun exercise here with a bit of speed.
Yeah, that's
Seems like a guy that succeeds in A-ball,
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's true. So that covers it. That's everybody for both of our teams. Guys, how did we just talk about 60 players in the span of an hour? That's got to be a record for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, normally we talk about like 5 players in an hour, so this is
And try to squeeze it within an hour.
round. Yeah.
Is there anybody that you guys are really proud that you got where you did, or anybody that you really hope to get on your team coming into the draft?
I thought about going with Matt Shaw and Jefferson Rojas at the beginning to kind of throw a wrench and the thing that jumped out to me about the system in doing this exercise is like every round that I came up, I thought of 2 infielders that I could grab and kind of block from you guys. And every time I thought about filling my outfielder spot, I couldn't really find anyone to do it. So that does tell me something sort of about this system, especially when you get through the first sort of 15 names. What you're doing is you're finding a lot more infielders than outfielders. And, I imagine that's something the Cubs will consider both sort of in the draft this year and, just moving forward as they build this organization. They're going to need to find some guys that look like outfield prospects come like 2027, 2028.
Yeah, two things stood out to me. I'll kick it to you next, Zumach. But two things stood out to me positionally. One was kind of what you hinted at, Brian, that there's a lot of flexibility between second, third, and short among players all up and down the organization, from guys like Matt Shaw to guys like Alexis Hernandez, right, where they're playing second and short or third and short or whatever. So that stood out to me. And then the other thing is with the starting pitching in this organization, I think you have a top line of guys that you feel really confident in as prospects. And then you also have some really fun depth, but there's not that like second tier of starting pitchers in my mind, right? Where that like you're expecting them to kind of break out, or you're expecting them to make the upper levels of the minors, but maybe not necessarily like high percentage chance that they end up making a big impact in the Chicago rotation. So you got like the Cade Horton, Jordan Wicks, Jackson Wiggins, Ben Brown, Drew Gray wave. And then you look at like the guys we've drafted, right? Then you get the Luis Rojano, the Will Sanders, the Brody McCullough, the Cole Franklin. Like those show off a lot of depth. And I think there's guys that we even didn't draft that like shows off there is depth in the organization, but they're more like depth players, not like really solid depth that make the Chicago rotation, if that makes sense, Zumach.
Yeah, totally. I was going to bring up the starting pitching depth because it is crazy that like the starting pitching and just pitching development in general is better than it has been in the Cubs organization since Mark Pryor, right? Like there are more pitching prospects that are legitimate major league prospects than they have had in 20 years. And yet I still think that that's likely an area that gets addressed this summer. So it's crazy, this like duality of evaluating the system. Because, we've got some absolute stars there. It is interesting how quick we reached for some of those kind of like middle day 2 type caliber players that are like, these are really accomplished players. The Cubs are making some adjustments. Connor Noland was a guy that I reached for. LMG has got some talent too. So it's just really interesting how we each kind of tackle that. But it's the pitching for me. And I think the outfielders, absolutely, that's true. There's some guys that we didn't bring up. The Cubs did make some kind of swings in that area, right? Like Zaire Hope is no longer in the Cubs organization, but that was the type of 2027, 2028 swing. Alfonso Rosario is a guy that we didn't talk about. And I will tell you that he had some fans in the Cubs organization. They think that they have gotten quite a a pick with him. So we'll see how it all turns out. I think he's got some work to do, but they took those like 5-6 year swings, and we'll see how it all works out.
There are a lot of guys in sort of the second half of our draft that haven't accomplished a ton yet, and this year is a really big hinge year. And I think that what that means is the Cubs system is really good right now, and it has a lot of really sort of guys close to the majors, AA and AAA, that look poised for success. But this year is going to be really important to tell us about the Cubs system in 2-3 years, how it's going to be, and the holes that need to be addressed. And they just need some guys that look at picks just 21 through 60 on here. Cubs need some real hits in that area this year. Not really for anything meaningful that happens in Chicago 2024 through 2026. They're good. They've put in the work. The system's good enough to help then. But the second half of this decade, they have to start thinking about that now. And those are the players that are going to define it a little bit.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that especially when you take into consideration that the hope, the expectation is that the Chicago Cubs will be a better team starting this year and in future years. So the draft picks won't be nearly as good. The draft pool won't be nearly as big. The trade deadline will see more prospects going away, like the Zaire Hopes and Jackson Ferrises. And so we saw this 8 years ago, right, where the Cubs were constantly having to deal prospects away. And the hope is that they can continue to replenish this organization, both through the draft and international free agency, but also through really strong development, like you said, Brian, of those guys in this kind of middle column we have of pick number 21 of Brody McCullough through the Kevin Valdez and the Zach Lees of the world, right? Those guys need to continue to get better. So next year we're drafting them in the top 20 when we do this exercise.
Yep.
So I guess, some other thoughts that I had, if we're kind of projecting this system going forward, I have two big questions of this organization right now. One, and I realize this is a bit ironic because they just did the reverse of this. I do wonder if the Cubs make a trade in which they move a fairly blocked upper tier major leaguer or, minor leaguer about to make the move to the upper majors for guys with higher upside lower.
Yeah.
Michael Busch fit that picture very well. He was blocked in by 3 Hall of Famers and an All-Star. That's just insane. And the Cubs needed that at where he plays.
Yeah.
But they do have upper tier minor leaguers who may be truly blocked, in which we see the reverse. I'm curious how that goes. The next thing I am truly curious about, I don't know, is will they embrace more variance with some of their upper tier draft picks? We saw a little bit of that with Cade Horton, but they kind of were able to spread that around a little bit and reduce that risk. But I am very curious if this is a team that is going to be playing in the pro season and hopefully drafting 28, 29, 30, something like that. Your Matt Shaws are generally not in that range. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pretty college heavy last year. And, I don't think that that's necessarily what, Dan Kantrovitz is like. I don't think he goes into a draft thinking I'm going to be college heavy necessarily. And so, when the Cubs pull that card to start to go away from that, that'll be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, any parting thoughts on our way out?
No, this is fun. Let's see how it turns out this year, but I think we got some really fun picks. Who I am most curious about, who will be the player that we look back on a year from now and go man, we drafted 60 people and we didn't include this guy.
Yeah, that is true. That's gonna be fun. I will just so you guys out there listening know, I will take these draft selections. I will post it over on social media. I'll post it over on Twitter, where you can find me at Out of the Vines. You can find Zumach at Ivy Futures. You can find Brian at Cub Prospects. You can find us there with this graphic of our teams. Check us out over on the Cubs on Deck YouTube page, over on Threads. stuff like that. Over on the 1060 West Discord channel, check us out over there. We have a prospect specific channel, which is where I live. I know these guys do as well. So yeah, go give your feedback. Let us know who you think, or even in the comments below on YouTube, let us know who you think won this draft out the offset. We'll see by the time the end of the year rolls around if who we think won early on really did win. So that should be fun. But in the meantime, we will be back in 2 weeks. Come March, we'll be back going weekly, I believe, because we have some affiliate season previews coming with all the broadcasters. So be on the lookout for that over on the YouTube page, over on the podcast feeds. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back in your ears in 2 weeks.